So I want to continue tonight with compassion, since we are in a series of teachings and practices around the Brahma Viharas, the heart qualities of the Buddha's teachings. And last week we did Tonglen, the Tibetan practice of breathing in the suffering and breathing out compassion for the suffering. And so tonight I want to continue with that, since we didn't get to discuss it that much. We did the practice, and then we had the Yogi in Disneyland book reading, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So what does compassion mean to you? You don't have to answer, but just reflect on what it means to you. What's it feel like when you're feeling compassionate? What are some of the other words or experiences that feel similar or connected to compassion? Empathy, mercy, caring. And does it feel, in your experience, is there a difference between self-compassion, being compassionate towards your own painful or unpleasant experience? Is that different than being compassionate towards someone else? Does it feel different when you're caring about someone else than when you're caring about yourself? And a lot of compassion, of course, is a very central Buddhist experience, teaching. It's one of the main transformative experiences that we have through practicing mindfulness. When we practice mindfulness of all of the unpleasant experiences that we have, both the painful and the suffering, the wise response that we learn, the developed, skillful response is learning to care, learning to be friendly towards our pain, and that this is, in some ways, it's one of the core reasons why the Buddha said this path goes against the stream, because compassion is not a ordinary experience. It's a somewhat radical, developed response, that the ordinary relationship to pain for human beings is aversion, is anger, fear, hatred, resistance, suppression, ignorance, and that mindfulness asks us to turn completely towards what's happening and feel it, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And for all of the unpleasant experiences, how many unpleasant phenomena did you experience today? If you had like a tally of unpleasant thoughts, how many unpleasant thoughts entered your mind today? 100. Only 100. Do I have 200? 300 going once. How many unpleasant, you smell anything unpleasant today? Did you taste anything unpleasant today? Did you have any unpleasant sensations in your body? Any pain? You're about to, if you haven't yet today. If you've been comfortable all day, now you'll have the opportunity to be uncomfortable, probably, sitting still for a while. Unpleasant emotions, painful emotions, thoughts, feelings. I mean, I know you get it. I know it's why we're all here. It's maybe it's, I want to make it a statistic and say it's like half of the practice, but I kind of think that there's three main skills we're trying to develop in meditation on the Buddhist path. But there's a long list, but I would on some level break it down to kind of the three primary building blocks. And one is compassion. The other is non-attachment, non-attached appreciation. And the third is not taking everything so personal, understanding the impersonal nature of so much of what we're experiencing in our human minds and bodies. So tonight we're going to focus on developing compassion. And the meditation instructions for compassion, the reason I did Tonglen last week is because I think it's more direct than the Theravadan compassion practices, which are either done through radiating a feeling of compassion. So first you have to generate a feeling of compassion, and then you bring that into your own experience, and then you radiate it out towards others. And in early Buddhist texts, it's done by radiating in different directions, sending compassion to all beings that are having pain or suffering in the East, all beings that are having pain, suffering in the West, in the North, in the South, in the Northeast, in the Southeast. And the Buddha breaks it down into this directional sending or radiation from your heart, from the intention to be compassionate towards the pain and suffering of others. So either that way or in the commentary practice of Theravadan Buddhism by repeating a phrase. And maybe the traditional phrase is something like, may you be free from suffering, as a compassionate, as a caring, as a empathetic statement, wish. May you be free from suffering. In some of my practice, I've liked to break it down to not just free from suffering, but may I learn to care about my own pain and the pain of others, rather than be afraid of it, rather than hate it. May I learn to care about my own pain. And when I say pain, I mean in all of those levels, all of the unpleasant thoughts, painful, unpleasant, annoying, internal experiences at all of the sense doors, unpleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, sensations in the body, difficult conversations that we have, difficult, sitting, the compassion for sitting in traffic, coming down Lincoln, trying to get here on time. All of it. And so radiating, or this repetition of phrases like we do in loving kindness. Some of you were here a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago now, when I did metta, loving kindness. That's where we started this series. And I said these three phrases, which are, may I be happy, or may all beings be happy. May I be at ease, or may all beings be at ease. May I be free from suffering. May all beings be free from suffering. Now, I learned that from some of my meditation teachers as loving kindness practice. But then when I started to study what the Buddha taught, I realized that those are three different practices. The only metta phrase is, may I be at ease, or may all beings be at ease. May I be happy, or may you be happy, wishing is actually a sympathetic joy. It's a sending appreciative joy phrase. And may I be free from suffering, or may all beings, may you be free from suffering, is a compassion phrase. And so when we do metta, you might have learned metta like that from me, just as I learned it from my teachers, although I think it is interesting for us to clarify, what was the original teaching, and then what's the practice and the skillful means to develop these positive emotions, positive responses. So compassion is our goal. So many of you have heard this from me before, maybe many, many times, some of you for decades, long time. my sense and the Buddha's teaching is that the default is aversion. And that's over here. We start with some level of aversion to pain. And that's natural. It's your nervous system. It's your survival instinct. Hating pain, it's not because you're a bad person. It's because you have a survival instinct. It's totally normal, totally natural. And we all start over here on some level or another in aversion to pain. And then compassion, as this on a scale, is over here. Now, of course you have some natural compassion, right? Like you care about others, some. But very few people, and I don't think that children are born with compassion for their own pain. We can learn compassion for our own pain, but it's not a necessary survival instinct. The baby crying for comfort, for food, is crying out of aversion for the discomfort of being hungry. Babies don't know how to self-soothe. At some point in your life, perhaps you learned how to self-soothe. I watched my children, as I was raising them, find different little techniques. My son got really into rubbing the tags on his blankets as a self-soothing. He would get his blankie, and then there was the nylon or whatever it was, but and I just watched he'd do it. And that was like a self-soothing technique that he found when he was uncomfortable, nervous, or having something unpleasant happening. He would self-soothe. I didn't teach him that. He figured that out all on his own. And so maybe you also figured out some healthy self-soothing. A lot of us have very dysfunctional and unhealthy, avoidance and self-soothing techniques, to the point where a lot of us became drug addicts, trying to medicate the pain and avoid the pain and create pleasure. So in the meditation instructions, we'll do compassion practice tonight. And then we'll have some more discussion about it afterwards. And I might do some combination of the phrases and the directions. And one of the things that I would really encourage you is to practice sitting extra still tonight. Noticing how there's an urge to move away from pain. When you get uncomfortable, wanting to fidget, wanting to move. And that part of how we develop compassion is by being with our pain. And as I said, the aversion, the wanting to move and fidget and move away from it is totally natural. That's the status quo for most of us. But we want to get over here to compassion. And the only path to compassion is through learning to tolerate pain. And this slow development of the skill of being uncomfortable, sitting in it, not moving out of it, not avoiding it, but turning towards it. And eventually turning towards it develops more and more tolerance, more and more mercy, more and more friendliness and empathy on this path towards caring, accepting, friendliness towards our own pain. And then I also believe that there's a way in which we're developing compassion from the inside out. That the more we learn to care about our own pain, the more naturally we have empathy and room and friendliness towards other people's pain. And so it's not just selfish compassion, but there is an altruistic quality of the more we develop compassion for our own experience, the more we will have room for others. One of my favorite suttas, teachings from the Buddha, he says that through this path, we become a refuge. One becomes a refuge for others. And compassion is one of the core qualities of someone who feels like a safe place and to share your pain with them. And there's that all too common phenomena of when somebody expresses pain to someone else, that they need it to go away, that it's hard to tolerate someone else's pain. And they want you to stop crying, and they want you to feel better. And they don't want to actually just sit with you and hold space for your pain, which is maybe an important process that we're going through. And it's one of the skills we're trying to develop, not just being with our own pain, but being able to really hold other people's pain and empathy, and being able to tolerate it, and not too quick to hand them a tissue and tell them to cheer up and get their shit together. Stop being so dramatic. Stop suffering already. You're making me uncomfortable. And so part of compassion is having plenty of room for other people's suffering, with a friendly, with a caring attitude towards it, not needing it to go away. I think that's also an important distinction, is that sometimes compassion gets defined or talked about as the alleviation of suffering, or that needs to go. The compassionate thing to do is to end suffering, and that's not. Of course, if there's something that you can do, by all means, do it. But part of the compassion skill is for all of the experiences that we cannot avoid. We cannot get rid of the heartache, the difficult thoughts, the wounds, the diseases, the grief, all of the difficult parts of life that are unavoidable. Compassion really becomes our only hope, is to learn to care about it. But Buddhism in no way is encouraging masochism or unnecessarily hanging out in pain or suffering. I heard a Tibetan teacher, Sokni Rinpoche, years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and I loved it. It was the first time I heard it. He said, there's real compassion, and then there's idiot compassion. And idiot compassion, the way that he was defining it, sounded a lot like codependency. A lot like, I'm going to do something to temporarily alleviate your discomfort, even though it's for your long-term detriment, like enabling. And that real compassion is, I'm totally okay with you being uncomfortable, and I'm going to be with you in that, and I'm not going to help you temporarily alleviate something that you need to learn to feel, that you need to be with. Does that make sense? And that a lot of times compassion does not get rid of somebody else's pain, or even get rid of our own pain. It's just a wise response to it. Compassion is not always, and then everybody feels better. It's like, no, the good news is that whatever terribly painful experience is happening is impermanent, and compassion is the appropriate response to it all the way from beginning, middle to end. But the good news is it will end, it will change, it will pass. So what I'm saying making sense to you? All right, let's meditate. Alan, please.
The idea that you need to take care of your own pain, you need to worry certain things, feels pretty arrogant. I would make that judgment about your pain. You talk about that.
What do you mean? It feels arrogant for the people have to be responsible for how they respond to their own pain?
No. If I'm going to make a judgment about your pain, it feels, it's a sense of arrogance on my part. I would know what's best for you.
Right. Oh, like that, whether or not it should go away, or there's something important to learn here. I don't know. I don't really know how to respond to that. I mean, it's a little bit connected to the next teaching or one of the coming practices, which is equanimity and compassion. It's hard to talk about these separately because Buddha put this in a package of compassion for pain, but understanding and compassion for others and compassion for all beings, balanced by the wisdom that understands everybody is responsible for their own happiness. And I don't know, it never struck me as arrogant to say, you're responsible for your own happiness.
I don't mean that you're responsible for your happiness. To say, this is a lesson you need to learn.
Right. It takes discernment. It really does. And I agree, because it's so situational. Sometimes saying yes and I don't know, I think of an active drug addict who's in a lot of pain because of the craving that the addiction experiences, or like a detox, kicking heroin or something. That person is in a lot of pain. Is it compassionate to give them a fix so that they're no longer in pain? Or is it compassionate to let them shit their pants and kick dope?
See, one sounds to me like a judgment one makes about himself, because how one expresses it, compassion.
Yeah.
The other feels to me like something that one does in terms of another person, their call.
Yeah. And so I like it. I like what you're saying, because I find myself in that dilemma a lot too. Like, I don't know what's right for you. I know what has been worked for me. This Buddhist map of taking full responsibility for my own pain, for my own happiness. And so I tend to think, oh no, that's true for all of us. But I like that question, not to too quickly jump to, I never give money to the homeless because I'd be enabling them, sometimes it's totally the appropriate thing to help somebody in a time of hardship. I like the inquiry, but I don't feel like I have a super clear answer about it. All right, let's meditate. Find a way to sit that's upright, relaxed. Establish a posture and relax into it with the willingness to be uncomfortable. Often our body tenses around discomfort, trying to suppress it or avoid it. So part of the embodied compassionate intention is to soften, to release tension, soften the belly, the jaw, shoulders. Relax into what's happening moment to moment. Just starting with ourselves, establishing as much compassion, caring as you can for your own pain. And perhaps using the phrases, may I learn to respond to all of the unpleasant experiences that I have with compassion. May I learn to respond. May I come to meet my own pain with tolerance and mercy and compassion. saying these phrases gently to yourself over and over. You can add in the phrase, if you'd like, may I be free from suffering. May I be free from suffering. The suffering of hatred, the suffering of resentment, the suffering of fear of my own pain. Remembering to soften, release tension, but to maintain the stillness as much as you can. And when if your body becomes uncomfortable, try to breathe compassion into the pain. Tolerance and mercy, friendliness, and acceptance of our own discomfort without getting rid of it. It's okay if you don't fully feel it yet. It's okay to fake it. The practice feels dry, like just words. These are positive aspirations that we're developing. Begin to open up this field of compassion from yourself to others, starting here in the room, the people that you introduce yourself to tonight, sitting near you, acknowledging that just like you, they wish to be free from suffering. Just like you, they have their own challenges and pains, difficulties, and suffering in their life. Extending compassion to their pain. You could use the phrase, I care about your pain, or may I learn to care about your pain. Filling the whole room, everybody here, extending from your heart and mind empathy, for the shared pain in the room. And then begin spreading outward beyond the room, beyond our Sangha, in widening circles, east and west, north and south. With a reflection on, an awareness of all of the different forms of suffering that are happening on this planet. From the big, obvious ones, people starving to death, people in war zones, people experiencing all kinds of oppression based on race and gender, orientation, religion. And not just humans, you can extend to all beings. Not just the gross forms of pain and suffering, but also the subtle forms. The stress, the fear, the clinging. The human condition, the survival instinct that we all share. We all know how difficult it is sometimes to have a mind and a body. This is universally true for all of us. So we radiate compassion from our heart, mind, in all directions, with the wish, may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be met with kindness and compassion. again, just coming back to your own direct experience in this moment. This body, this heart-mind process. With a mindful investigation of sensation and emotion. With the intention to meet anything unpleasant or uncomfortable with tolerance and acceptance. Perhaps breathing into, softening around.
Thank you.